So should I start?
Yes, yes.
Pooja,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
So the first question that we have is that what were the main tools of engagement that you used in your projects to bring people together?
Do you want me to answer each question right away, or do you want me to take a few questions first? What do you prefer?
I think we can go one by one to the questions. Like
Okay,
after
okay, right. So I think the presentation I gave last time also to the class covered a bit of this. So tools of engagement really vary, also depending on which stage of the design development, which stage of the process you are in. When it comes to the design development, we use definitely models, which is a very typical sort of a tool, right, for architects and for designers. The beginning always is with the community meeting. So if you're designing, with the larger community, or if it's a smaller group, what we call a focus group discussion, right? So basically, just getting to know everyone, understanding, what are the sort of outcomes you have in mind, what is the sort of objective, and what's the sort of collective direction we can take for that. And then after that, when it goes on to the design stage, so models is definitely one way. Sometimes it's just walking around on the site and discussing with your limbs, your hands and your legs, sort of like drawing in the air. I think is also a very convenient sort of a tool. And I also I've been working with this architect called Ashish Ganju. Have you heard of him? He has a firm called Greha in Delhi. Quite a senior architect. He's in his 80s now. He's done some really good work, some beautiful buildings. And he was telling me, he was saying that, Swati, I don't draw anymore. So we were working on something, and of course, like every designer likes drawing. So I would just like start drawing with him. We were thinking together, and he's like, I don't do that anymore. And then he told me a story, just at which point he realized that maybe, architects don't always need to draw. And he said that he realized in his conversations with the people that he was working with and designing for, that I mean they would understand, through the drawing that he had in front of him, and whatever, like his body language and his gestures, but no one was looking at the drawing. They were always looking at him. So at the end of the day, he realized that the drawing is not really that important. The whole communication was between him and the people around him. So at the end of the day, I think this is also, I found it quite profound. I mean, of course, I will not stop drawing till I reach that, stage where I feel, okay, I don't need to communicate through drawings and models. But I think that's the basic sort of relationship, right? Which is just that face to face, that human interaction, and that takes so many forms. We also use role play a lot, for instance, in our interactions. So when we were working with the street vendors, and we were helping them sort of self-organize, supporting their self-organization of their markets, in terms of social distancing, because that's a new phenomenon, right? So in that, we would also do a lot of role play. So of course, we would draw out the space for the vendor card, which is 6 feet by 4 feet, but also that needs to be laid out on the entire road, and there's a gap between them. So sometimes maybe not everyone gets space on the within that same area, or it's just a longer stretch that people occupy, and these things have to be mapped out on the ground. And what is the distance between the customer and the vendor? I mean, I think for us these are very easy to understand concepts, like technically 6 feet, 4 feet. But I think to sort of map them out, enact them out on the ground is also important. So I mean, just the sort of role play between acha aap grahak ho, or aap vikreta ho, and that's the sort of distance between you. So I think that also becomes quite playful, but also quite important and quite interesting. um, and then of course drawing physical models. What I've also talked about in that presentation was models which are at a 1:1 scale, so just like real life sort of prototypes. They're always very, very helpful. um, yeah, I think there are many, many more, but off the top of my head, yeah, I think these are the things which are coming to mind. And then also, what starts happening is when you're describing something to someone, and then that person starts describing it to others. I think that's the best sort of test of the fact that you have managed to communicate. I mean, and this is not just for design, I'm just saying in general when you are talking to people. Yeah, I'm going to stop with that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So the other question is actually related to the answer that you gave. So it's that could you give us an insight into some critical key points you learned while engaging with people? And the other is that, like, how do you like start talking to these people? Because what we've seen is that they've just received an eviction notice and like they're in this kind of a space. So how do you start talking to them? Like, how do you, like, what's the first thing that you say?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I don't know if I covered it in the last presentation, and it's important to switch on my video to be able to talk to you. But often, what I've realized is, and I think this I learned early on in my field visit, so to say, is people mirror your face. So if I am smiling at you, you will be comfortable. You smile back at me. But if I am like not feeling, very confident, or if I'm feeling anxious, then people will look at me with suspicion, and that has happened, especially when I go into a very tight knit community and I'm feeling like out of place, like obviously because it's I'm an outsider. And then I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. Then people look at me with suspicion. What is she doing here? Right? But if I go in, feeling, I mean, of course, you need to have done it like a few times, because pehli bari mein nahi hota. It's obviously like 2 3 times. And then, if you go in with that confident smile, and also a sort of honesty and transparency, that I'm a student, I'm here to learn. I'm here because my teacher asked me to do an assignment at the end of the day. Can you help me out? And everyone loves students. Students have such a past to everything. Let me tell you, while you are a student, I mean, just try everything, because students have no agenda except for like doing well in their studies, which everyone can relate to. So, so if you go into any place and you're like, this is something I'm trying to do, this is something I'm trying to learn, people will be happy to talk to you. People will be happy to guide you. But yeah, I think that sort of like self-awareness and honesty is important. And also, what I say, when it comes to ethnographic research, one thing I like to talk about is we should be willing to share information about ourselves as well, right? When we are asking people for information, I mean, why would they want to part with that kind of information? We should also think about how we would feel if we were in their shoes. So also we've done some activities, for instance, to understand different ways of documentation. Like we take pictures, we take notes, and we take videos sometimes, right? Which is the most sort of intrusive. So I did this activity with, I think, SEP students only. It was a summer winter workshop. Um, and we basically recorded each other. So we kind of divided ourselves. Maybe Kriti, you should try it sometime, or maybe you have already. But we divided ourselves into groups of two, I think. Yeah, so basically just pairs. And there were a set of questions that one person had to ask the other. And while that person was asking the question and the other person was answering, they were taking notes. And these were like sort of intimate questions, and they become intimate over, like, every question becomes more intimate. So, what is your relationship with your parents? Are you in a relationship? And things like that. And so when someone is asking you these questions and taking down notes, you get quite conscious. And then that person then has to switch to like recording on audio. Can I record this? Then of course the person becomes more conscious, and then it moves on to a third stage when we are like, okay, we're going to record this on the video. And I mean, just ask someone, are you in a relationship on video? And see the kind of answers you get. And also what happens is people start performing, of course, right? I mean, all of us do that, and then you get performative answers. So that's why we also say that if you're doing sort of field work, ethnographic research especially, we always discourage people from taking the phones out. Sometimes we also take, I mean, the newer generation, the younger generation also takes notes on the phone. Now, what is that? I don't understand. Anyways, but I think the moment you flip out your phone, people get a bit conscious, because they feel like there's some sort of recording happening here. So the least intrusive that I have found is taking notes. But even that, people sort of just like become a bit more conscious the moment you take out your notebook and your pen. So many times with my team, what I guide them on is just having conversations. And then you go back home, and before you sleep, always before you sleep, take down notes. because the next day it will not be the same. It's very important to take down, all the random thoughts, all the different sort of points that, that have come up. And then next day you can sort of analyze them, connect the dots, and, create the sort of analytical outputs and the patterns that that research entails. So getting back to your question, I think just be transparent. You're a student. You don't have to be more than what you are, and you have to be very clear on why you're doing what you're doing, right? And at the end of the day, also remember that you are learning. You are not there to help. You're not at this point, right? I mean, yes, eventually you think that this solution would be helpful for someone, but right now you're there to take people's time, you're there to take information. So you should also be willing to give, right? And what can you give? You can also give information on what you're doing, any other information that they might want. And yeah, and then you'll be all set. Try this a few times, and then you can also give such a talk to people, I'm sure.
I hope so.
You will, don't you worry. This is how I started out. I remember doing so many of these things alone, and I think sometimes it's also good to do these things alone. And yeah, I've made so many mistakes, and I mean, not at the expense of people, I'd like to think. But practice, I think, more and more you do it, the more comfortable you become, the more confident you become.
Right. Thank you so much.
But are you going on field? Like, are you able to now, despite COVID, meet people, talk to people?
No, like we haven't gone yet, but
No. But you
yeah.
will. Like, is that the plan?
So one of the students did go.
Okay.
So he managed to go and sessions, and though that was shared with the rest of the team. But the idea is that eventually there's going to be a couple of students who work on the implementation strategies, and they will try and work out how the tools can be. So we're trying to see if one of them who's in Ahmedabad can go to site and see how that can work out.
Yeah,
But
because
we're
things are
still
getting
very
more
unsure.
normal, right? I mean, now we're also getting back to the field, so to say. We've started building again. So yeah, I guess things are opening up a bit.
Yeah, but it's just that, with the university and them being students, one has to be very careful.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. Sorry, one thing I forgot to add. I just forgot to conclude what I was saying to Pooja. So yeah, of course, you're not going to be asking, about their relationships when you're talking to people. That was just an uncomfortable question. That's just an example of an uncomfortable question. But also if you are asking for information, like, I mean, many times in ethnographic research, we think we can ask people what is their monthly income, for instance, which obviously we wouldn't like if someone's asking us that question, right? But sometimes, even if you get there in a few stages, like you've sort of like created this trust with the person you're talking to, explain what you're doing, and then you feel, okay, maybe I can ask. Then you should also be willing to share information about yourself, like how much does your household make, right? I mean, as a student, you're not earning, but as a professional, if you ask, you should be willing to share your salary. So I think basically that's about it. Like whatever we are asking for, if we are also willing to share, I think that definitely makes it more equal and much easier.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay, great.
So the next question is that how would you characterize your participation strategies in your projects?
Sorry, how would you characterize?
Your participation strategies in your projects.
Okay, and how is it different from the tools of engagement? Can you just help me understand?
Um, I think tools of engagement is referring to how you start the design, and participation is like during the
Okay, so
building stage.
maybe it's a broader sort of a thing. The tools were like specific sort of, I think, processes that you were talking about. Okay, so at a broader level, I think it's really very important to go through an intermediary, like an NGO or a community organization, which has already been working there and has a relationship with people. We have gone in directly, without knowing a lot of people, which is also what we did for mod school. We just knew like this one person who took us there, and we became we got to know the school staff, and through them we got to know the rest of the community. But that's a longer process that requires more time. And so especially if you're going in as a student group, if you're going in for a semester sort of an exercise, or even if you're trying a new project, working on something new, always go through intermediaries, people who have a relationship with the community, who the community also trusts. So I think that would be a participation strategy that I would talk about. And then also I think, forms of leadership is also important. So definitely, working with community leaders, and then there are different kinds of leaders, right? Maybe some people don't have that title, but they are playing an important sort of a role. So identifying, understanding those social networks, working with those people. Um, Also, I'm realizing more and more that a lot of our work is because it's in the public realm. It is also mostly with the decision makers who are mostly men, and that also needs to change. So how can you involve more people who don't have a say in the decision making? How can you involve more women? How can you involve people who are more sort of marginalized within the community? Of course, requires more time and also different modes of engagement. Might not be in the public space, then they might be more sort of private spaces. So you would need to figure that out. So what are the different sort of spaces, social and socially and spatially speaking, where you think these engagements can take place? I think maybe those are the things to think about. And also frequency, like how often do you need to go there? If it's a community meeting, maybe it's like a one-time event, or at the beginning, the middle, or the end of your sort of project there, let's say. But if it is research, then it requires, I don't know, maybe twice a week. You're going much more frequently, and you have it spread out, in a more sort of an intense way. So yeah, I think these are the different things to think about. Is that what you were looking for? Are there any sort of specific questions within that? Maybe then more thoughts will come to my mind.
I have a question actually from that. Like you said that, yeah, we have so many, or most of the decision makers are men. So do you have some examples of how you might have tried to tackle that and included either the youth or the women during your discussions? Like what kind of, how it played out basically?
Yeah, I can give examples. I also would like to say that our approach is not always perfect. I also realize this as a gap in my work, so I'm trying to like address it more and more. But I mean, I think it's just so many things you can do. Like you have to also see what are the I mean, when someone is basically asserting as a community trying to assert their right to be there, I think that becomes the first sort of a goal, and then you try to get to other things that everyone should be able to have their say. Ideally, everything should happen at the same time. Examples, yeah, there are many. So I will just give you first a generic example. So for instance, if you want to work with youth, there are different kinds of, let's call them stakeholders, if you will, the different groups of people, right, who you're working with. So the way you engage with youth would be very different from the way you engage with children, would be different from, let's say, the elderly, right? So where do the elderly get together? I don't know, are they playing a game of cards, the men somewhere? Where do the youth hang out? Do they have this sort of terrace where they're hanging out, this corner where they're all like, swapping, I don't know, apps or games or information? Where are the, teen girls hanging out? So I think identifying those sort of spaces, and also people who are connected to those spaces. That's why I was talking about leadership. So one is like people who already have been working there, but also in terms of leadership, like if there is a youth leader, if there's a young person, you talk to that person, and then she can take you and connect you to the rest of the people, and you can explain what you're doing. Specifically, I think in our projects, we were working on the Anganwadi, which we're actually going to get back to building tomorrow. So this was in an informal settlement. So we were building a daycare center, and so when it came to building it, it was all men, right? And so there was me, and there was another female architect, and then they were all men who were building it. So that, that we can't change. We can't say, okay, everyone's going to build it, because, who are we to come in and change the social structure of a society, right? That, I mean, of a community. But at the end of the day, what we could do is, after it was built, then we called the women, we invited them, and the teenage girls, to tell us what they thought about the space, and what they thought should change. And actually, they had so many insights which were very valuable, much more valuable than perhaps, the men who were building it with us. And yeah, I think so. Basically, being a bit mindful of who's involved and who's left out helps. But again, definitely, I think we also have a lot to learn, and I think with every sort of process, every project, we are figuring that out.
So then in this case, it was more of a post, after the design has been implemented, there are inputs, like not so much during the initial phase.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to say, it was a prototype we were building. It was like a 1:1. So for the Anganwadi, we built a 1:1 prototype in bamboo, to take design feedback. So instead of a model, we built a real, like a life-size model. And so even though they were not involved in the building of it, but the feedback, the women were involved, which was, yeah, obviously very critical. Yeah.
So I have a question related to that. Like even right now on the project that we are working on, we were thinking of including the people in designing the clusters themselves. So like we were thinking of the game board situation. So in that we were thinking how everyone could get a chance to, do a participation in it. So what we initially thought was that we can call members from the family, and in each different round different people from the family can come in. So do you think there is a better idea or a solution where we can involve everyone, like not just the male members in this cluster building?
Well, I'm not really sure I know the project this time, but if it's the same as what I saw last time, I mean, it's about resettlement, right? Like a community which has been resettled. It's a
Yeah.
very sensitive, topic. It's basically like an entire community which has been uprooted and made to resettle somewhere. I don't know. Was it a forced eviction? Were they resettling by choice? There's a whole process when it comes to eviction. There's a whole due process that needs to be followed, which is most of the times not followed. At least in Delhi, it's not followed. Like most of the evictions are forced evictions. So I guess when there's such a disruption of people's lives, and their sort of um, let's say social fabric, then I think before getting into it, in terms of like what can the process look like, right? How can the process be better? I think maybe there's a lot of conversation that needs to be, I mean, I think the trust building also needs to happen first. Why are you doing what you're doing? But also understanding how the experience was for them, right? And I think first you also need to have a clear understanding of that, before you go into, because one thing is like, if you go in because there is a need for something, right? But if you have identified the need, then you have to also go first, um, understand that, and so if the need has come from you because you think, as a design fraternity there is so much that we could be doing better, then you need to first understand, how useful that would be for them in terms of the design brief. And also, yeah, I mean, before talking about a better process of resettlement, you need to understand the existing process of resettlement. So I don't know if you've had these conversations, but I guess that would be the starting point before figuring out what ways to meet them. Have you been able to understand that with them?
um like we have not really had that conversation with them, but we've been trying to understand the current procedure and all.
So I would say, also because of your ages, I would say maybe talk to people your age. Like talk to, so I'm guessing you all are in your early 20s, right? So maybe if you talk to people who are in, let's say 18 to 25-year-old, that group, and explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing that, then you'll get a very honest sort of a feedback on what they even think about the whole thing. They might just laugh it off, right? They might just say, Ki Didi, what's the point now? Or they might say, actually, it's interesting. If you can convince them, ki, actually, I would like to learn if you have the time, and maybe this can be helpful elsewhere and for someone else who's in a similar situation. So I think that would be the first step, and then, yeah, then you can figure out who would like to be involved with you, who has the time to be involved. Even when we were building Mod School, the name of the school there was One Pool School. We also had a very sort of romanticized idea of the community that, if we're going to be like working with the community, then everyone's going to be like working together. But it's not a monolith. Like community is not like, one like body of people. It's made up of different kinds of people. And people were busy. The parents of the children who we were designing the school for, they were busy. They were working hard on their farm all day, or they would go to the vegetable mandi, sell their produce. So they had no time to be thinking about designing the school. Matlab, what are we talking about, right? Tell me, if there's a cleanliness drive in your colony, will you go? Will you leave your classes and will you be participating in this community cleaning, sort of initiative? You won't. So, or you might, right? It depends on you, but it also depends on the person who's going around for this drive to actually talk to you and explain to you why this is important. And maybe they don't need to explain a lot because you already feel this sort of, responsibility, and I want to like keep my neighborhood clean. Or maybe actually you need to understand, okay, fine, what's in it for me, right? So I think that's exactly what you need to be starting with. And at the end of the day, people don't have time. When you're taking their time, then you have to make it like convincing why you're taking their time, why they should give their time to you. And trust me, once you've got that right, they're going to be with you. I mean, if they actually see like the point of what you're doing, they'll see it through. They'll take it upon themselves to make sure you pass with flying colors. That has also happened. But I think that sort of initial understanding of the brief and discussing it with them is very important, with the people you're talking to. And I would say maybe go through young people, because they might be able to relate to you, or you might be able to relate to them, or go through any leadership positions who might be able to just explain to the entire group. And also the fact that you might want to talk to them uh, in a sort of a regular way, that this is not the only time you're talking to them. Who can take out time to talk to you a few times in the coming weeks or months? So lay out the sort of roadmap. What are you looking for? Does that help with the question that you were asking for?
Yes, like, yeah. So the next question is that
Sorry. Should we ask the government question now, since we're talking about that?
Yeah.
I mean, so we were really, it's always curious for us, because as urban designers, we always, we have to kind of work in the public sector, and therefore with the public players like the governments. So we wanted to ask, how does that fit into this? Because do they probably, like, we are making assumptions here, but we were talking and we're like, maybe they come in with certain criteria that you can't do this and you have to do this, or even the evictions, they are mandated by the government itself. So what kind of, does any conversation happen there, and what kind of conversation?
I'm just laughing because it's so cute. It's like the government is also like in your mind, the idea is like it's a monolith, the government, it's like the community, but at the end of the day, the government is like made up of different, yeah, like you said, different players, there are multiple agencies. So in Delhi, if DDA maybe evicts some people, DUCIB is providing shelter to those people, then the MCD might be doing something else, right? So they're completely like different agencies, different sort of organizations. So you have to figure out which part of the government you want to interact with, right? So here, who would be, so basically a stakeholder map is what we usually draw when we start, because it helps us identify what the primary and the secondary and the tertiary stakeholders, who have a stake in the project, who have the, and then there's also something, I mean, I'm sure your teachers might have talked about it or look it up, just like, the interest and the influence, sort of the matrix, right? Or you can also call it impact and influence matrix, in which basically we just try to plot like who is interested the most in this sort of a thing, right? And who's interested the least, or who's impacted the most and who's impacted the least, right? So let's say that's your x-axis. And on the y-axis, you look at who has the most influence and who has the least influence, right? So many times what happens is people have the most interest have the least influence, and people who have like the most influence have the least interest, right? Which is the problem, because they're the least impacted, and that's what you want to change. So I think for just starting with these sort of tools also helps you figure out who you want to engage with, and to watch it, what intensity. And of course, like I think the whole purpose of community engagement is to make sure people who have the least interest, least influence but high interest, are able to move to that quadrant where you have higher influence, right? So then you will realize that maybe there is a municipality, who's working in this, who was responsible for the resettlement who were the different agencies, who's getting water there, who's getting different services. There are elected bodies, there are nominated bodies. So I think you have to figure that out. And of course, there's a civil sector, the civil society organizations, the NGOs, right? So I think once you chart all of that, then you're able to figure out, of course, also the networks between them, like the interconnections, and then figure out who you want to talk to, who might be helpful, who you need to talk to. So right now, I mean, you're also recording this, so I'm going to, but I think you might not be putting it up, right away. But okay, but right now, like for us, when we're working with the farmers, it's really important that we're working with the DDA. Like the DDA is the agency which is evicting them. So it's very important for us to reach out to them, because they're the ones who hold the power. And what we are, after we built this school many years ago, few years ago, we realized that also that is a symptom of the problem. That's not the problem, right? We haven't like in any way solved the issue. And the issue is that why are farmers being evicted in the first place, right? Why are they removing farms along the river to build parks, which is quite, it doesn't make sense, to remove one form of green to build another form of green. But it's our whole like imagination of how a riverfront should be. And I don't even want to talk about the riverfront of Ahmedabad, let's not even come to that. But anyway, so how can we sort of influence that? How can we positively maybe influence that, contribute to that? Is something we need to talk about at a planning level, at a policy level, right? So we have identified, okay, for this, these are the different stakeholders. There's DDA, there's MCD, but the people that we need to really reach out to right now are the DDA, and that's what we're doing. Like we hope to secure a meeting with them. Any day now. But yeah, so that's just an example of figuring out your strategies, figuring out your participation, processes, who to talk to and how.
Okay, so since we're on this, there is a question that what is the biggest hurdle you face to get social projects implemented? And I'm sorry, but I'm wondering if government is one of them.
To get social projects implemented? No, I think government is, I think that's the way. Like, we need to be working on this at a sort of a governance level. What is the biggest hurdle? Wow, that's such a broad question. Can you break it down for me? For social projects, what do you mean? Like socially relevant projects for doing good for the humanity? What do you have in mind?
Similar projects like resettlement projects or public level projects.
Then I think I'll go a bit more like at a philosophical level, because many times I feel like these are failures at a planning level, but I'm also like deeply convinced that these are not just that; it's also a prejudices. I feel like it's a class divide, it's a caste divide. At the end of the day, I think it's not really that a planning is lopsided. I think that's just one part of it. It's just like who we want to focus them on and who we don't, which comes from something deeper, which is at a societal level. But I don't think that's the answer you were looking for. So if you give me a more specific question, I can give you a more specific answer. What is the biggest hurdle in doing projects like which is socially relevant? Is that your question?
Yeah, so suppose like we have this project of resettlement. So if we want to implement it, then in that case, what is the hurdle? What are the kinds of hurdles that are faced?
So the project of resettlement, what do you mean? Because resettlement has happened. So what is the project of resettlement you have in mind?
Sorry, if I may step in.
Yeah, please.
I think what Pooja means is social projects which are more coming from the perspective of design. What are the kind of hurdles that one usually faces? So, and I think perhaps we don't even have to talk about it from the resettlement perspective, but just from your own experience of doing mod school or the Anganwadi or any other projects that social design collaborative will done. So have you all faced hurdles?
Yeah, and many hurdles in so many different ways. So that's why I don't know how to answer this question. It's so broad. Like I would say, like, for instance, lack of funds is a huge hurdle. Like to get anything done, and to get them routed to things which really matter. For instance, like look at the smart cities project and look at what kind of projects there are, right? And where is the money going? How many of them are actually focusing on community development? How many of them are actually focusing on creating infrastructure which people require? And how many of them are focusing on sort of like iconic, projects which are more visible, which are loud? Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hurdle, like putting the money where actually it's required. I think that's the biggest sort of challenge.
Yeah,
Apart
if I
from
can
that,
add something here, like this was one of our biggest questions, like how does the whole financial aspect play out? Like if you could elaborate a bit on that, you're saying, the money needs to be routed properly. So could you like explain a bit where it comes from, how, like maybe the time frame that it takes just to get the funds, and then all of like those things in part of the process?
yeah, I was talking about money coming from, meaning to say, in terms of the budget allocation by the government, really. So that focus. But you were talking more about how a practice like ours can sustain itself, right? Which is always the last question after every discussion. So I'm like very used to this. I just want to say, I don't want to like break your hearts, but I just want to say that this is really tough. And before you want to get into this field, I think just accept the fact that you're never going to have money, like for yourself. You're never going to have enough money, and if you're okay with that, only then you get into it, because otherwise you're going to be really unhappy. So I think it's going to be a constant struggle, but there are different ways of achieving self-sustainability, right? At least as a practice to stay afloat. And I think everyone has a different way. So there's social enterprises. I think there are lots of incubation models, which sort of like incubate such social enterprises, in which if you have a good idea that works for social good, then you can scale it up, right? And then you can also come up with some sort of a business model, how that sort of a service or product could also be bought by people, right? So I think there is that whole social enterprise model. Then of course the grants, the work that you're doing, it can be supported by grants, and it can be supported by donations. If you create an NGO, a non-profit, you can receive CSR funding, for instance. The way we are doing it is we operate as a design practice, and we sort of cross subsidize. So again, people work on different kinds of cross subsidizations. Like they could be doing commercial, sort of architecture, and cross subsidizing it using the funds and routing that to support work they feel is really like monetarily, in terms of like financially, there is no sort of revenue, but at the same time it needs to be done, right? So it's a bit of like philanthropy, and like within the organization you're doing it. In our case, we are doing a bit of that. A few projects, which are, all of our projects are basically of the same kind, but some of them are able to make funds, and most of them are not. So we're trying to just sort of redistribute those funds. And there's one more thing. I just lost my thread. Proof of concept. So I also feel that sometimes you also maybe need to spend years of work in creating a proof of concept, which is just like, this is the way, because you're doing something new, right? So this is the way that this problem can be addressed, or this sort of issue can be addressed. And you spend like a good amount of your life doing that, and then people see value in that, and then they're like, okay, I also want to do this. I want to work with you. I want to hire your services to do more of this kind of work. Well, that's another way. I think that's what we are doing without realizing it. But the more and more work we're doing, because we think it needs to be done, the more and more people want to work with us, and some money is trickling in. Yeah, I think 10 years on, I could be giving the same talk. So that's why I just want to break your tiny hearts before you set out on that path. But it's deeply meaningful, deeply satisfying, and I think it's very, very important. So yeah, make up your mind. I hope you go down this path.
Thank you. Our next question is a bit slightly on a different note. So we're going to be exploring materials and the whole materiality aspect to the design. So we wanted to ask, what do you think that the role is of materiality in implementing designs, or even proposing them? Like, how much focus do you usually give on it? What about that sort of?
Yeah, I think it's very important, definitely in the field of design and architecture. Especially if you're If your budget is limited, you're definitely thinking of something which is affordable. I think sustainability is really important, right? So ecological sustainability, or economic sustainability, and definitely social sustainability. I think using materials that people are already using is very important to learn, because they're using it for a reason, right? Either because it's affordable, readily available, it's working for some reason. Um, yeah, and I think people associate also a lot of, I think aesthetics and is so intertwined with the, so things that we work towards, which is like pride in a space, ownership of a space, that's very much linked to aesthetics as well. And I think to make something beautiful is also very important. I think, something beautiful can be really powerful and, of course, bring a lot of joy. And I think in that also materiality plays a very important role. So I think it's also good to experiment. You might be bringing in something which people haven't thought about. And it could go either way. It could just seem very alien and not be appreciated, or it could actually, be quite aspirational. It could be, quite unique and, make people really like it. And I think that's where sort of user feedback becomes important. So definitely materiality is important. Your choice of materials is important. Aesthetics is also important. And you just need to figure out whose aesthetics, who's the audience, whose sense of aesthetics are you subscribing to. Yeah. I think those are a bit high level concepts, but yeah, good to start thinking about these things.
So like we also saw from the presentation that like you were proposing these for the vendors at the boundary wall with the like the weekly markets, like these very frugal kind of structures where it can be this like put up or taken down. So one of the questions like from Rishabh is like, how do you ensure that it's used the way it's kind of supposed to be, there as a shade, rather than maybe the materials are just taken and sold off or used for something else later on? Like, do you ensure something like this, or is it kind of a chance that you take?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. Also, we've stopped that project because I'll tell you why. So the thing is, the work is very seasonal. So what happened is when we were working with vendors, because the weekly markets were closed, right? We were working really hard to, create some sort of social distancing strategies to show to the government that markets can operate. You can open them, and we can still follow social distancing protocol. And the markets did open. I mean, I don't know how much of a role we had to play in it. I'm guessing very small. But also at the same time, through these conversations, other sort of needs emerge, right? And this is what I was talking about, Pooja, when I was talking about needs. Like needs emerge, from the people. And so the need that emerged was that Didi, it gets very hot, and also when it rains, like we don't have any shelter. And then like we don't have any shade. And it's also important to understand why in some markets there are shades and in this market there isn't, right? They're also traveling by auto. They can't afford to carry a lot of stuff, so they just carry. So these were people, the ones we were working with, what they were carrying clothes and shoes. So they would kind of bundle it up, so they couldn't carry like bamboo, which is very long, wouldn't come in an auto. So then that's why we're thinking about like PVC pipes and stuff like that. But by the time we prototype and came up with like 2-3 options, it wasn't hot anymore. And what happened is winter came, and then when we actually put up the prototype, they were like, it's okay. Meaning to say, they wanted the summer sun. Usually with prototype, what you do is you put it up for a month. You see like the effect, and so I mean, and at the end of the day, you see people want to put it up. No, you don't want to put it up for them. Like it works if people like find it useful, they'll put it up. So they didn't put it up because they were loving the winter sun. So we were like, okay, I think for this we'll come back in the summer. Right, because then it will be like hot cakes. Everyone will be like, yes, I want one because I need one, right? So and at that time, also leaderships are important to establish, because there were some people who saw the bigger picture. When we were prototyping, this was with Seva, and so there were some people, they said, yeah, we will put it up. There was a sense of responsibility also. I mean, because they're a bit of like, they have a leadership role, and also maybe they want to be on the favorable side of Seva, right, which is also supporting them. So for whatever reasons, we're like, okay, if we work with them, so by the time summer is here, they would be the first ones to sort of like, adopt it. And looking at them, other people, might want to adopt it. But also like, we don't want to force anyone to adopt it. Like we made it because they asked for it, right? So, so yeah, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, if people don't use it, it doesn't work. Simple. If they use it, it will work. And then you also need to be flexible. This is long-term work, I mean, definitely it will not happen, within a season. Um, Sometimes it does, but also your question about, take it away and things like that. So the other interesting story which happened here was, so when we were saying, okay, we're going to put up 5 prototypes for a month, and who are the 5 families or 5 vendors who would like to take up the ownership of this prototype. So 2 of them were very eager, and then the other 3 were sitting next to them, they said no. And we were like, why are they saying no? Like what is the reason to say no? So basically, the guy who had said yes and who was very eager, who helped us like set up even the prototypes of the other people, it was also quite young and fit and stuff like that. So he was saying, Didi, basically they are afraid that you're going to charge them for it, right? So they thought they're going to be charged for it, and that's when. So I said, no, of course not, it's for free. And then Seva, the social workers, they were like, no, don't say it's for free, because then everyone will say, why are you giving it to them when you're not giving it to us, right? So yeah, it's a bit complicated. So basically, finally, it was like, okay, we are loaning it to you for a month. And if you find this useful, then then we can figure out a way you can have it. And then also then the rest of the people can also benefit from your sort of initiative. So um because the idea was that people would buy it themselves, or maybe Seva would pay 50% for it, for the kit. If the kit costs, I think, 1,500 or something, and then they would pay 50%, but only if they're really convinced. I mean, otherwise, they'll just do something which works for them. And yeah, so I think take it. They would, I mean, so that they were not being given these things; they had to buy them, or at least they could be subsidized by Seva. But for Seva to subsidize, it was also important to understand if it is really needed, and to what extent. Good design is not just good because it's easy to put up and transport. It's also solving a very critical problem. So that's why it's not going on right now. But yeah, maybe after in the summer you should check our social media, and if we are talking about it again, that means it's required. I feel like that might have answered the kind of questions you had in your mind. Yeah. Yeah, these are tricky things. And that's why, we also benefit a lot from the expertise that Seva brings, right? So it's really important to, I think, read a lot, talk to a lot of people, and you can see all these different models, which work always.
I think
I'm losing my voice now, as we are
that's all
nearing.
the questions we had. I think, Pooja, is there anything that I'm missing out on? We kind of ended up clubbing a few of the questions together. So
Oh,
I
sorry,
had.
did you say you're done? Did you say you're done? I missed it.
yeah, I think like all our questions have been asked, but
Okay, great. And are you representatives for the rest of the course? I mean, the rest of the class? So Srishti, Moksha, Simran, Charvi, Rajiv, Kanishk, all of the questions you've taken, is it?
no, so we are kind of moderating this session. So we are in charge of bringing in the questions, and
Right.
yeah,
So they are from everyone.
yeah, some of them are from others, but mostly we have been like the ones who have come up with the question.
Okay. You guys have a lot of questions then. I'm sure everyone contributed to this. And if anyone else wants to also, share or ask something, please feel free. All I want to say is, this course is an opportunity for you to, go out there, step outside your comfort zone, and maybe, look at design in a way that typically it's not looked at. So please do use this opportunity. I know now is not the best time because there's a pandemic raging in the world, but vaccines are near and the fear is gone, more or less. Oh shit, I'm being recorded. Do what your university is asking you to do, but just in case you think you're following all precautions, you might just want to make use of the opportunity that this course brings. And yeah, just talk to people, and you will see what works, what doesn't work. At the end of the day, I think it's about learning that, right? I mean, of course, you need to also have a good output and get good marks. But I think it's also figuring a lot of things out in the way, and that's why I think if Kriti and Sebastian who are going to help you answer those questions on the way. Moksha, Srishti, I feel like you have something on your mind. Do you want to share anything, ask something, Samriddhi?
No, I
Sorry,
think whatever I had in mind has been already asked. So yeah.
I have one last question. In the last semester's presentation, I saw saw that you said that wherever the, like, however people eat together and cook together, that is how they build their houses, and that is how the cluster comes together. So could you like elaborate on that, like
Arey, वो
how
तो- but that's obvious, no? You said it yourself. No,
मतलब,
you
like if like it was one of your experiences, or did you see it somewhere
So
that,
where do you live with your family?
yeah.
Okay, so okay, so first let's talk about a hostel, for instance. Like I went to a hostel in college, right? And the way we eat, it's a collective, like it's a community like way of eating, right? There's a mess. There's a certain way that food is prepared, and we all eat together, which is very different from household, for instance, right? If you have a joint family, it's very different how the family comes together as opposed to like a smaller family. If everyone eats together, is another thing completely. I don't know in how many households actually everyone sits together and eats, or generally we're eating in our bed, we eat different times, right? And I think that says a lot about our social relationships. Now think about it. I don't want to ask you personal questions. I don't want to put you on a spot, but just think about, yeah, in your own family, and even talk to your friend. And I think that says a lot about how your family hangs out, right? And I think when you start looking at it at a community level, then you start understanding at a sort of a cluster level how people come together. Are there 2 3 homes who are sharing a chula, and maybe they're all relatives, right? They're all like of a part of the same sort of a larger joint family, or everyone sort of cooking within their house, in a very sort of individual way, or there is collective cooking. So I think spatial forms are derived from a social networks, right? And social networks are based on how we make food and how we eat. It's very, very simple. And I think culturally it's so interesting. I mean, Sebastian can tell us about his family, how that would be so different from Kriti's family, for instance. And I think that's the beauty of it. That's what you would like to understand, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think everyone's really tired. I'm
Yeah.
feeling out. It's 8 o'clock. And well, I certainly am, also because it was Monday, the most sort of stressful day. But I'm an email away. I do take time. I realized I missed one of Kriti's emails, and I think a student had written to us in the past. But I will always respond to you. Yeah, and especially if it's urgent, you can WhatsApp to me. Just always say I'm from Kriti or Sebastian's studio. I mean, just so that I know, or just say the studio that we had today. And yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to get in touch. Is what I'm trying to say. And good luck. And I look forward to seeing your outputs, on the very, very vibrant, very active Instagram handle that you've got going. So I look forward to seeing how this shapes up.
Thank you so much, Swati. I think this was absolutely. I think this session, compared to last time, was much more helpful because they will definitely be able to apply all of this directly into the. But also, I'm happy we did the last session because at least they heard you already.
Yeah, and
So
I
we're
think the visual also helps in getting that anchor. Yeah, so I think both of them together help. And I think we're
yeah.
also trying new things out, so you see what works for you. Yeah, as a class.
Yeah, so this sort of format got triggered because we tried it out in our winter school that we did recently and it worked
Right,
really well. So
right.
we said perhaps let's try it out in the studio this time.
Yeah,
It seems to be working. We'll get some feedback from them after this session with you. But
yeah, and
again, thank you so much for the time that you've given us
Yes.
again.
you're welcome. And I was just saying, I think especially for me also because it's a second session of the same like kind of course. So yeah, there's definitely a continuation. So I think that's been helpful. And yeah, thank you for always remembering me and keeping me in the loop.
Thank you,
We'll
sir.
we'll
Thank you,
meet
sir.
soon.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, come to Delhi or maybe I'll come. Are you in Ahmedabad, right, Kriti?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come over. Okay.
Cool.
See you then. Good night,
Take
everyone.
Thank
care.
you,
Thank
Swati.
you so much.
Bye.
Good to see you. Bye
Bye.
bye.